The parents' stories here were pretty gripping and real, and I in no way doubt their experience. That makes sense. I mean, you had some pretty horrific spots at the hands of our public schools. There's no doubt that our schools have not, and especially when it comes to people in the BIPOC community. There's just no doubt we have failed there. And that's on my party, that's on the Republican Party, that's on our state government, that's on our lack of support. What I do struggle with, though, and I think we need to solve those problems, and I feel a sense of urgency, as many of those parents that spoke today felt a sense of urgency. I get that, right? What I'm struggling with, and what strikes me as odd, is this. While I think, and I don't know which person said it, they made a really good point that money does not equate to success, and you have to look at Minneapolis compared to Mounds View, right? They're spending approximately the same amount per student, right? So we know money isn't the equalizer in that respect, right? And I think that when you look at the realities of Mounds View and Minneapolis, there's a lot of different socioeconomics going on there, and frankly, different demographics, right? And that makes that a really difficult comparison. But I think more importantly, what I think is important to recognize is that over the last 20 years, we haven't even kept up with basic inflation for our schools. We haven't even taken the time to fund the schools to avoid the problems that many of these parents are talking about. We as a legislature have failed our responsibility and failed our schools because we have chosen not to fund them at the numbers they need just to tread water, much less get ahead. And so for me, the question that comes to my mind then is, why would we spend dollars elsewhere when we're not even taking care of the schools, which by every testifier here today told us they're not getting taken care of? Why would we spend less money in those schools then when they're clearly underfunded? And they have been clearly underfunded for 20 years. Now, my friends across the aisle like to talk about how we've had increases every year. And it's just simple math, folks. If last year it cost 10 cents to buy a pencil, and this year it costs 12 cents to buy a pencil, and I increase your funding to 11 cents, have I increased your funding? Sure. Are you now able to buy the pencil? No. And that's the reality we're dealing with. We are not funding education adequately. And every testifier here today has given us wonderful examples. Well, I shouldn't say wonderful, very accurate examples of how our public education system has failed, especially people of color. This, however, is not the solution, in my opinion, right? We have a responsibility to public schools and to make them better, right? And there should be accountability for what each one of these parents went through today. There should be absolute accountability for that, and those situations need to be fixed so we're not in that spot anymore. But this spending public dollars on private schools, that's not the answer, nor can I support that, because the vouchers don't work for me. There are ways to make this work. I think we have a big overhaul that needs to happen. There has to be a reckoning within our education system. I agree with that. I just don't think this is the solution, right? And so I'm constantly frustrated because I hear my friends across the aisle talk about this and use this issue as a banner issue, right? At the same time, I watch them consistently vote against the things that would provide the funding to those areas that need it most. And that duality is unacceptable to me. I watched my friends across the aisle cut major taxes a couple of years ago for corporations, but couldn't find more money for education. Not cool. So for me, that's a problem. So I am not comfortable with this bill. I want to know, to the extent that it's worth it to anybody that's listening, that I understand and hear what people are saying. I have young kids as well that I worry about, right? But I do not believe this bill gets us there. And to have people from the Center for American Experiment, which is just a joke to begin with, is ridiculous. I can't take their propaganda seriously ever. So I hope when we have people talking, when I hear parents talking, I think that's a wonderful example of what's going on in a real conversation. When you bring conservative think tanks in here, it's hard to take them seriously. So I appreciate the time to talk. I am not a fan of this bill, and I certainly hope that this gets a long look before it gets anywhere near the floor. And thank you for granting the